This message is divinely timed, and it is not arriving in your life by coincidence. It is meeting you in a moment that heaven has already seen, already measured, and already prepared for, because you are not here by accident, and neither is the pain that brought you to this point. This is for the one who has been betrayed and told to stay silent, for the one who was overlooked while others were celebrated, for the one who was falsely accused, misunderstood, and left carrying wounds no one ever apologized for, and for the one who knows what it feels like to be forgotten by people while still sensing, somewhere deep inside, that God has not forgotten anything. Your suffering has never been meaningless. Even in the darkest moments, even when you could not explain why your path felt so much heavier than the paths around you, something in your spirit kept whispering that your story was leading somewhere sacred. That is why the story of Joseph speaks so deeply to your soul, because it is not just ancient history to you. It is a pattern. It is a mirror. It is a reminder that God knows how to take someone from the pit to the palace, from rejection to recognition, from hiddenness to favor, and from pain to purpose, without wasting a single tear. So before we go further, receive this as confirmation, not just content. If this message speaks to your spirit, let your agreement be visible. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, share it with someone who needs this word, and comment below, "My pit prepared me," as an act of alignment with what God is doing in your life right now. Because what you thought was the end was only the beginning of your preparation. The reason that beginning felt so painful is because the pit was never punishment, even though it may have felt like abandonment while you were inside it. The pit was preparation. It was the place where God allowed the surface structures of your life to collapse, so that something deeper, stronger, and more eternal could be built beneath them. When you first entered that low season, it may have seemed as though everything valuable was being taken from you at once. The support you expected was missing. The recognition you thought you earned did not arrive. The voices you trusted went quiet. The people you believed would stand beside you either disappeared or revealed that their loyalty had conditions attached to it. And in the middle of that collapse, you were left with a terrifying question that so many chosen people face in hidden seasons. If everything around me is falling apart, what is God actually doing? But the answer was never that God had turned against you. The answer was that He was clearing away what could not support where you were going. The pit has a brutal honesty to it. It strips away illusion. It removes the decorations people use to avoid themselves. It exposes where pride had blended itself into identity, where fear had dressed itself up as wisdom, where dependence on people had quietly replaced dependence on God, and where false foundations had been holding up a version of your life that could never survive the weight of your actual calling. Some things can only be revealed when the ground beneath you disappears. Some truths can only be learned when human support is withdrawn. Some transformations can only happen when you can no longer distract yourself with motion, noise, or shallow reassurance. In the pit, you came face to face with what remained when everything unnecessary was stripped away. You discovered what you believed when comfort was absent. You discovered who you were when applause was gone. You discovered whether your faith belonged to God or merely to outcomes you could control. That is why low places are often holy places, even when they do not feel holy in the moment. They are the chambers where false confidence is broken, so real confidence can be formed. They are the classrooms where performance dies and authenticity begins breathing. They are the severe mercy of God, refusing to let you build your future on things too weak to carry it. And as painful as it was, the pit began teaching you things that comfort never could. It taught you endurance, because you had to keep going without immediate answers. It taught you prayer, because there were battles no human conversation could fix. It taught you humility, because the fantasy of self-sufficiency could not survive there. It taught you faith, not as a slogan, not as a mood, but as a stubborn inner posture that keeps reaching for God when circumstances provide no visible reason to hope. It taught you inner stability because the outside became too unstable to trust, and somewhere in that hidden place, your roots had to reach deeper than emotion, deeper than human approval, deeper than what looked fair, and deeper than the timing you would have chosen for yourself. This is why many people misunderstand chosen ones during the pit season. From the outside, it can look like loss, stagnation, or weakness. From the inside, it can feel humiliating, confusing, and almost unbearable. But beneath all of that, something extraordinary is happening. God is building an interior life that cannot be manipulated by public opinion. He is training your spirit to stand, even when external conditions shake. He is teaching you how to hear Him without requiring constant signs. He is creating a person who can one day stand in influence without collapsing under its weight, because they have already been broken free from the addiction to appearances. The pit hurts because it removes shortcuts. It forces depth. It makes you live without pretending. And maybe one of the hardest parts of that season was the isolation. Not just physical isolation, but emotional and spiritual isolation. The feeling that people could not fully understand what you were carrying. The ache of realizing that some relationships were only built for the version of you that required less truth, less growth, less discernment, and less destiny. Isolation has a way of revealing relationships with ruthless clarity. When the lights go out, you find out who loved your presence and who loved your usefulness. When your name is no longer circulating in favorable rooms, you discover who was attached to your essence and who was only attached to your momentum. When you no longer have the energy to perform strength, you discover who honors your humanity and who only wanted your productivity. This revelation can wound deeply, because it is painful to realize that not everyone who had access to you had the capacity to go where you were going. But even this pain had purpose. God was not only preparing you through the pit, He was preparing your environment by removing people who could not enter the next season without damaging it. Some people had to lose access not because you became cruel, but because your future required a cleaner atmosphere. Some voices had to fade because they were shaping you according to fear, dependency, compromise, or limitation. Some attachments had to break because they were rooted in who you were before refinement, and they could not survive who you were becoming. That is why the pit was not just a place of suffering, it was a place of sorting, a place of separation, a place where heaven quietly decided what could continue with you and what had to remain behind. What felt like abandonment was often divine editing. What felt like being forgotten was often being hidden from contamination. What felt like delay was often the slow strengthening of a soul that would one day carry influence with integrity. And when you look back honestly, you can see that the person who entered that season is not the same person who is emerging from it. The pit stripped things from you, yes, but it also gave something back. It returned you to essentials. It returned you to prayer without spectacle, faith without performance, humility without self-hatred, and strength without noise. It made you less impressed by appearances and more aware of substance. It made you less dependent on immediate validation and more sensitive to quiet conviction. It trained your inner world in silence, so that when outer opportunity finally comes, you will not be dazzled by it or destroyed by it. And that is the part many people miss. The pit was not an interruption of your calling. It was the private construction site of your elevation. It was the secret training ground where God prepared you away from cameras, away from applause, away from interference, so that when the time came to lift you, you would not only be gifted enough to rise, but grounded enough to remain. Yet just as the pit taught you how God prepares people in hidden places, the next layer of your story reveals something even more painful and more powerful. Because betrayal was your blessing in disguise. Betrayal is one of the deepest forms of pain a human being can endure, precisely because it does not come from strangers standing at a distance. It comes through trusted hands. It enters through open doors. It often arrives wearing the face of familiarity, loyalty, friendship, love, or shared history. And that is why it cuts in ways that ordinary hardship does not. A random obstacle can disappoint you, but betrayal rearranges the way you understand trust. It leaves the nervous system alert, the heart grieving, the mind replaying moments that once felt safe. It makes you question how long the disloyalty was growing in secret. It makes you wonder whether the kindness was ever real, whether the bond was ever mutual, whether the closeness was genuine or merely convenient. Betrayal is painful because it is both a wound and a revelation at the same time. It hurts what you loved, but it also exposes what was hidden beneath what you loved. And although that pain is real, although heaven never asks you to pretend it did not cost you something, there is a deeper truth inside it that chosen ones eventually come to see. Those who betrayed you were unknowingly pushing you toward prophecy rather than destroying it. They thought they were ending something, but they were actually advancing something. They thought they were cutting you off, but they were only severing ties that could not carry the weight of your future. They thought they were diminishing your life, but God was using their choices to redirect you out of places where your destiny would have been delayed, diluted, or domesticated. This is the strange sovereignty of God, that even human disloyalty can become part of divine strategy when a life is marked by purpose. The betrayal was never good in itself. God did not need evil to be evil in order to prove his power, but he is so wise, so exact, so unthreatened by human manipulation that he can take what was meant to wound you and make it serve what he already promised over you. That means betrayal becomes one of his sharpest tools for separation and purification, because it reveals false loyalty with a clarity that comfort never will. It exposes unhealthy attachments you may have defended too long. It uncovers relationships that felt emotionally powerful but were spiritually misaligned. It forces the truth into the light. And one of the hardest realizations in this process is that not every bond that feels intense is assigned by God. Some connections are strong but unhealthy. Some are familiar but limiting. Some are affectionate but spiritually costly. Some make you feel needed while slowly disconnecting you from what you are actually called to become. Betrayal, painful as it is, tears the veil off these relationships. It shows you who could celebrate your presence only while you remained small enough, compliant enough, wounded enough, or dependent enough to make them comfortable. It exposes who loved access more than accountability, who loved proximity more than purity, who loved your gifts more than your growth. And once that revelation comes, it changes you. Not because you become cold, but because you become clear. Rejection becomes revelation. Separation becomes necessary for elevation. You begin to see that some people were never built to accompany you into your next season, not because you are superior, but because the call on your life requires an atmosphere they could not honor. Some relationships could only survive while your boundaries were weak, your discernment was dim, or your identity was uncertain. Once God began strengthening those areas, the connection started breaking under the pressure of your becoming. And what once felt like loss begins, slowly, painfully, honestly, to reveal itself as liberation. Because betrayal did not only show you who was false, it taught you how to depend more deeply on God. It taught you what it means to lean on divine stability when human loyalty fails. It taught you to stop building your sense of worth on who stays and who leaves. It taught you that the approval of people cannot be the foundation of a life meant to be led by heaven. That lesson is costly, but it is sacred. It anchors you in a place no human betrayal can fully destroy. And that is why betrayal was not the end of your story. It was the breakthrough that redirected you. It forced a separation that your emotions may never have chosen on their own. It broke attachments that would have delayed your calling. It purified your circle, your motives, your discernment, and your dependence. It made you wiser, cleaner, and more rooted in God than before. So grieve it honestly, but do not misread it. They did not stop your destiny. Their betrayal became part of the road that led you toward it. And after betrayal has done its cutting work, and separation has exposed what could not go with you, the soul often enters an even deeper mystery. Because your faith was tested in the prison, in that long and difficult season where nothing seemed to move, where time felt heavy, where answers were delayed, where prayers seemed to rise and then return like echoes in a closed chamber, and where it appeared, at least on the surface, that your obedience had brought you not into relief, but into confinement. This is one of the hardest places for any chosen person to endure, because unlike the pit, which is sudden and shocking, the prison is extended. The pit wounds quickly, but the prison wears on the mind. It is the season where you have already lost enough to know pain is real, yet you have not seen enough breakthrough to know when anything will change. It is the place where you wake up and face the same walls, the same limits, the same unanswered questions, the same sense that your life is being held in a pattern you did not choose and cannot control. This is where many people become weary, not because they stop believing in God altogether, but because they cannot understand why a faithful life can still feel hidden, delayed, and restrained. Yet even here, what looks like punishment is often preparation, at a depth few people recognize while living through it. The prison is where faith is refined beyond feelings. It is where trust stops feeding on visible progress and begins learning how to stand when there is no applause, no timeline, no human explanation, and no immediate sign that your consistency is producing anything at all. This is where your faith had to become more than inspiration. It had to become structure. It had to become how you thought, how you responded, how you served, how you carried yourself when circumstances did not flatter your hope. The prison stripped away the demand to always feel spiritually strong and replaced it with something deeper, a steadier devotion that keeps choosing God even when emotion is thin, even when clarity is partial, even when nothing in the environment appears to confirm that you are close to breakthrough. And because of that, the prison became a strange kind of workshop, a hidden school where responsibility, maturity, and stewardship were being formed in ways that public success could never teach. Joseph did not waste away in that season doing nothing. He learned how to serve in restraint. He learned how to remain useful in limitation. He learned how to carry responsibility without visibility and to maintain excellence without recognition. In the same way, your unseen service has mattered more than you know. The quiet ways you kept showing up, the way you remained faithful in duties no one celebrated, the way you handled small responsibilities while carrying large disappointments, the way you resisted the temptation to become careless just because you felt forgotten. All of this was forming in you the kind of maturity that future influence requires. Hidden obedience is never wasted. Unseen service is never lost. What is done in obscurity is often what teaches the soul how to handle visibility without becoming intoxicated by it. The prison tested your integrity because it asked whether you would remain true when being true brought no immediate reward. It tested your perseverance because it forced you to continue when stopping would have felt emotionally justified. It tested your humility because it placed you in conditions that offered little room for self-importance. It tested your trust because so much of that season made no sense while you were living it. And perhaps that is what made it so sacred, because it proved whether your relationship with God was built on transaction or surrender. Could you still remain aligned when the outcome was slow? Could you still guard your heart when bitterness seemed easier? Could you still tell the truth, do the right thing, honor your convictions and serve with dignity when your life looked nothing like the promise? This is where sustainable faith is born, not the fragile kind that depends on constant emotional highs, but the durable kind that can survive silence, delay, obscurity, and inconvenience without collapsing into cynicism. The prison shaped leadership in you before leadership ever had a title. It taught you how to carry weight without drama, how to discern people while remaining compassionate, how to wait without becoming passive, and how to let God develop depth that no audience could yet see. It trained you to carry future power without pride, because it showed you who you are when power is absent. It taught you that position does not create character, it reveals it. So when your time comes, you will not confuse promotion with identity, because identity was already being forged in the cell. And that is why the story cannot end in confinement, because once the prison has finished its refining work, the next movement of God is often startling in its speed. And this is where the truth begins to burn brighter than ever. God is about to turn your pain into promotion. The same story that once looked like humiliation, rejection, and delay is about to reveal a purpose far greater than what your eyes could read when you were suffering through it. What felt like setbacks were not random fragments. They were coordinates. They were arranging you. They were positioning you. They were forming the exact inner structure necessary for the outer assignment that is now approaching. This is the mystery Joseph's life makes impossible to ignore. That God can reverse circumstances with astonishing speed once the hidden work is complete. A person can go from forgotten to summoned, from confined to consulted, from overlooked to necessary, in a single divinely timed moment. Heaven does not need decades to do what human systems struggle to accomplish slowly. When the appointed hour arrives, what has been prepared in secret can move with sudden force. That is why you must not interpret delay as denial. Delay often means that timing is still doing its invisible work, that the vessel is still being strengthened, that surrounding conditions are still being aligned, and that when the moment comes, it will not merely lift you, it will place you in the right setting, with the right preparation for the right purpose. What once made you feel ashamed is about to speak in your favor. The rejection will reveal what it protected you from. The humiliation will reveal what it purified out of you. The delay will reveal what it built within you, and the tears you shed in private will not remain meaningless symbols of survival. They will become part of the testimony of how God formed substance before giving you scale. Doors are about to open, not because you manipulated them, forced them, or exhausted yourself trying to prove your worth, but because divine orchestration is stronger than human striving. Recognition, favor, access, and opportunity are not always the result of networking harder, speaking louder, or pushing relentlessly. Sometimes they are the result of God deciding that the time has come for what He cultivated in silence to be brought into view. The right door at the right time can do more than years of frantic effort in the wrong season. The right conversation can shift what long frustration could not move. The right moment of remembrance can unlock a path that looked permanently closed. And when that movement comes, it will not be random luck, it will be the unveiling of purpose. Your pain has been working behind the scenes, preparing you for visible promotion and influence. Not all pain does this, of course. Pain by itself can merely wound. But surrendered pain, processed pain, consecrated pain, pain that you let God shape rather than waste, becomes material for stewardship. It gives you wisdom without arrogance, authority without cruelty, empathy without naivety, and perspective without illusion. That is why promotion in your life will carry depth. It will not simply be an external improvement. It will be the outward expression of years of inward construction. And once that truth is understood, another truth follows naturally, because your character qualified you for the palace. It was never only your talent, your gift, your intelligence, your charisma, or your visible potential that made you ready. Gifts may open doors, but character determines what survives after the door opens. Talent can attract attention, but trustworthiness sustains influence. Ability may impress people, but spiritual stability is what allows a person to carry responsibility without collapsing into ego, compromise, or confusion. The palace in Joseph's story was not merely a place of honor, it was a place of burden, discernment, governance, and service. It required more than brilliance. It required a formed soul. The same is true for you. Through suffering, you developed humility, because life taught you how little control human beings truly have. And that revelation softened what pride once tried to inflate. You developed compassion, because pain enlarged your understanding of people's hidden battles. You developed patience, because delay trained you to stop demanding immediate outcomes from processes that require time. You developed forgiveness, because bitterness would have poisoned the very heart God needed to keep clean for the next season. You developed self-control, because unrestrained emotion could not be allowed to govern a life carrying long-term purpose. These things are not small, they are palace qualities, they are leadership materials, they are evidence that what you carry is safe enough to be trusted with greater weight. Hidden obedience matters here more than many people understand. The The quiet choices, the unseen integrity, the consistency in private, the refusal to compromise when no one would have known, the decision to keep your heart tender instead of becoming hard, the willingness to tell the truth when dishonesty looked easier, all of these things created spiritual credibility. Heaven sees what people overlook, God measures what public culture rarely honors, and spiritual credibility is not built in a day. It is built through repetition, through the thousand small obediences that form a trustworthy inner life. That is why the palace must never be misunderstood as a reward for suffering in the shallow sense, as though God owes position to anyone simply because they endured pain. The palace is a platform for service and responsibility. It is an assignment, not a trophy. It is where private formation meets public need. It is where a healed perspective begins to help others survive what once nearly broke you. It is where wisdom gained in obscurity becomes nourishment for people who need stability, clarity, provision, and leadership. This is why character mattered so much. God was not merely trying to get you out of hardship. He was preparing you to become someone who could be trusted once hardship gave way to influence. There are many gifted people who never learn this lesson and who therefore confuse elevation with entitlement. But your story has been too costly for that illusion. You know what it means to be low. You know what it means to be overlooked. You know what it means to serve without being seen. That history, painful as it was, protects you now. It makes you harder to intoxicate with status. It makes you slower to worship position. It reminds you that leadership is not first about being admired, but about being useful, being steady, being clear, and being able to shoulder responsibility in a way that brings life to others. That is why character, not just ability, made you ready. And because that readiness is real, the final turn in this movement becomes possible, because divine recognition is about to find you. There is a difference between self-promotion and divine recognition. One strains to be noticed, the other is found at the appointed time. You may have spent years wondering why you were hidden, why your name was absent from rooms you knew you had the depth to bless, why your work, your wisdom, your faithfulness, or your presence seemed to remain covered while louder, shallower, or less formed people moved ahead. But obscurity was not rejection, it was divine camouflage. God hid you until the right time because both the world and you needed preparation. The world was not ready for what you carried in its earlier form, and you were not yet ready to carry the consequences of being seen without the deeper formation now living within you. Hiddenness protected you from premature exposure. It gave your roots time to go deep. It gave your gifts time to be purified from ego. It gave your discernment time to sharpen. It gave your heart time to heal enough that visibility would not reopen old wounds in destructive ways. Divine camouflage is often misunderstood because it feels like being forgotten. But God never forgets what He hides. He conceals with intention. He covers with purpose. He keeps certain lives out of public reach until the hour arrives when hiddenness is no longer protection, but delay. And I believe many of you are standing close to that turn now. Divine remembrance is beginning. The right people are about to notice, mention, and make room for you. Not because you begged for access, but because what you carry has reached its appointed season. This is how God works so often in Scripture and in life. One conversation can change everything. One introduction, one moment of remembrance, one divine encounter where your name enters the right ear at the right time for the right reason. The years before it may feel long, but when the shift comes, it carries a precision that reveals how intentional the timing always was. That is why you must remain ready in spirit. You do not need to panic or perform, you need to be prepared. You need to remain aligned. You need to remember that when recognition comes from God, it is not merely for vanity, it is for assignment, influence, and kingdom service. It is not about collecting admiration as proof of your worth, it is about being placed where your preparation can finally meet the needs it was built to serve. The recognition coming toward you is functional, it is purposeful, it is connected to people who need what God has formed in you. It is connected to decisions, spaces, responsibilities, and opportunities that require someone whose soul has been tested, whose character has been shaped, whose faith has survived the prison, whose heart has been purified through betrayal, whose humility was strengthened in the pit, and whose gifts are now mature enough to be entrusted with greater reach. So do not despise the years when nothing seemed to happen. Do not curse the obscurity that once protected your becoming. Do not underestimate the value of quiet faithfulness. The same God who hid Joseph also summoned him. The same God who allowed the prison also opened the palace. The same God who let time stretch also knew the exact hour when time would suddenly tighten into fulfillment. And that is why you can take courage now. Not because every detail is already visible, but because the pattern is already clear. You are being formed, not forgotten. Prepared, not punished. Concealed, not cast aside. And now the season is shifting. Recognition is not coming to decorate your ego. It is coming to deploy your obedience. It is coming to place your character where it can serve. It is coming to let the wisdom built in private begin helping people in public. It is coming because heaven does not waste formation, and what God has made ready in you is too purposeful to remain hidden forever. And now the story reaches its turning point, because this is your season of manifestation, the hour when what God formed in secret begins to step into visible expression. And you must understand that you did not survive all of that pain just to remain hidden, hesitant, and unsure of who you are. The pit built you. It stripped away illusion, pride, and every false support that could not survive your calling. The prison shaped you. It taught you how to endure silence without losing faith, how to serve without applause, and how to remain steady when nothing around you seemed to move. Every betrayal unlocked deeper authority. It forced separation from what could not go with you, exposed what was false, and pushed you toward a dependence on God that people could never provide. None of it was wasted. None of it was random. None of it was proof that you were forgotten. It was all construction. It was all preparation. And now you are moving from surviving to reigning, from hidden preparation to visible purpose, from being the one who endured in silence to becoming the one who carries wisdom, clarity, and strength in plain sight. This is not the time to shrink back into old insecurity. This is not the moment to speak timidly about what God has made clear. This is the season to walk boldly, to speak confidently, and to carry yourself like someone crowned by heaven. Not in arrogance, not in performance, but in holy alignment. A person who has been prepared by God does not need to force authority. It is already present in the way they stand, in the way they speak, in the way they refuse fear, and in the way they move with quiet certainty. So lift your posture, guard your mind, stop apologizing for the weight of what you carry. Stop asking small spaces to approve what heaven has already appointed. You have entered a new season, and new seasons require new language, new confidence, and new agreement with God. Your elevation is not just personal victory, it is a divine appointment. You are being raised so you can lead with wisdom, heal with compassion, restore with understanding, and embody the very answer to prayer that others have been waiting to see. What God is doing through your life is larger than comfort. It is larger than applause. It is larger than revenge against those who doubted you. It is about service, stewardship, and sacred responsibility. And when you see the full picture, you realize that every painful season, from the pit to betrayal to prison, was part of divine preparation. God was never absent, even when he seemed silent. He was never careless with your tears. He was never confused by the delay. Every hidden year carried purpose. Every closed door carried protection. Every lonely night carried formation. The season of obscurity is ending, and the era of divine favor, fulfillment, and visibility has begun. So lift your head, embrace your authority, prepare your spirit for sudden elevation, because when God moves, he does not need endless explanation to prove himself. He can change a story in a moment. He can open what no person could force open. He can place you in rooms that once seemed unreachable and establish you in ways that make it clear His hand has done it. The same God who raised Joseph from the pit to the palace is about to raise you too.